This is Father Dominic Holtz coming to you from Rome, Italy, with a word of hope for Thursday of the third week of Lent. It's often been said that as hard as it can be to win a war, that winning the peace that follows can be even more difficult. It's not that war is easy, war can be terrible and hard, but even after a decisive victory, when it's clear that the enemy cannot rise up again, that he has been fully defeated, still afterward the peace can be troubled. There can, of course, be pockets of resistance, some of the old enemy that, although defeated, still cause trouble, still cause real harm. But there's also another troubling possibility, that people who were occupied before, occupied by a foreign and hostile power, nonetheless can be seduced to long to restore that occupier back to power, even though he has been thoroughly defeated. When the Son of God entered the world, he entered a world that was occupied. I'm not speaking here of the Roman occupation of Judea, although that was true. I'm talking about the more fundamental spiritual occupation, the power of the forces of hell, of Satan, of the demons, of the unclean spirits that we hear about in today's gospel. These terrible forces had occupied the world of man since the fall. Men and women found themselves seduced to worship them under their terrible influence, twisted in their morality, tortured in their bodies, convinced to offer them sacrifice. These terrible powers were principally among the things that Jesus came to force out, to expel. Jesus came as the stronger man who casts out the strong man that had occupied the house and takes what the strong man had taken illegitimately and disperses those spoils to those who follow him. So we know that Jesus came to overthrow the dark forces, and we know that by his passion and his death, his descent among the dead, his resurrection and ascension to glory, that all of those together won the decisive victory. The powers of hell and death and sin are defeated. They're defeated forever, and they will never own the earth again. And yet, as with winning the peace, sometimes we find that there are pockets of resistance. There still are dark and unclean spirits in the world that have to be cast out. But also, more terribly, there are people who are swayed to return to them. As Jeremiah the prophet was warned in the first reading, the people who were given the holy law of God, who were sent prophets repeatedly to call them back to obedience of the law, those people will still find a way to reject God's goodness, still find a way to reject his message of life. So also, with the resurrection and the power of life that we have from Jesus, there are still people, even knowing the power of that life, that eternal life that we have in the risen Lord, they turn back to dark ways. They turn back to what is evil. The message we have in the gospel, then, is to stand with Christ, to know that however we are assailed, whether by earthly foes or even more importantly, by spiritual evil, we know that if we stand with Christ, we stand with the victor. We stand with him who has already won the victory. And that, my brothers and sisters, is a word of hope.